Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another day of Throne of Eldraine previews. We have a lot of rares to look at today, actually. If you're curious as to the sources of any of these preview cards, just check out the description below. You're going to find the information there, which content creator previewed which card. Also, if you still want to pre-order a box of Throne of Eldraine, if you go over to FlipsideGaming.com, you can use that Heroes promo code. Save yourself a little cash. That also supports the channel, which is always appreciated. But now, without any further ado, let's get into it. You know the drill by now. We're starting off with a few cards that we saw yesterday, but we did not see these variations of the cards. If you want to hear my thoughts on the cards, just check out yesterday's video. But in case you were curious as to what these variations of the cards look like, here's two showcase cards. Arden Vale Tactician and Merchant of the Vale. And then we have the regular copy of Oathsworn Knight. Yesterday we saw the extended art version. Folio of Fancys. This is a weird one. Let's talk a little bit about it. So when you play this, it's a mostly reciprocal effect, at least the beginning part. Players have no maximum hand size, and you can pay 2x and tap, and each player will draw X cards. Now, the next part, though, is not reciprocal. Blue and 2, tap. Each opponent puts a number of cards equal to the number of cards in their hand from the top of their library into their graveyard, so it will mill. However, once this hits the battlefield, your opponents are going to be able to adjust. So if you're trying to mill somebody out, you might get 1 or 2 activations where you do something with this, but then as time goes on, they're just going to pitch their hand and they're going to be prepared for it. Now, you could try to counteract that by making everybody draw cards. The downside to that, though, is if that's your strategy to draw a bunch of cards, let your opponent draw a bunch of cards, and then try to mill them, you're giving them a bunch of cards and you're using your mana to create that process, which means you're not playing the cards you draw. So that could be really, really awkward. And if they are concerned about this card, pretty sure they're going to draw an answer if they keep drawing cards, right? Not to mention that you might get buried in card advantage because you might not have as much accessible mana as they will. Now, that sounds pretty bad, but there's more to it than just that. There's actually some positives here. First, for Drafter Sealed, this is a cheap artifact that could definitely matter with some other cards we've been seeing over the last week or so. Secondly, you have to consider this. There are a number of cards we're seeing, and we're getting more and more every day, it seems, that care about cards either in your graveyard or your opponent's graveyard. And if that's the case, if you need to get cards in your opponent's graveyard, this could facilitate that pretty early in the game. Again, it might only work a couple times before they start to adjust, but if you can get some extra cards in the graveyard, there are cards that care about your opponent having at least 7 cards in the graveyard, then that might have just turned on something else that you have in your hand or in your deck. So I think there are reasons in Sealed and Draft to play this card. If you don't have those reasons, maybe you skip it, but you might be happy with this if you have some good payoffs. Also, what about Standard? Could it see play there? Narset's a thing. I think there could be a Narset control deck that would like to play this. Also, this could be fun in Commander Pillow Fort or Group Hug style decks. Even in Brawl, there might be some good interactions with this card for sure. The Magic Mirror. This one is a mythic. On the left, you see the regular copy. On the right, you see the extended art copy. This is quite the casting cost here. 3 blue and 6. But it does cost 1 less to cast for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You have no maximum hand size, so we're doing that again. And at the beginning of your upkeep, put a knowledge counter on this, then draw a card for each knowledge counter that is on it. So as time goes on, this can actually draw you a whole lot of cards. Let's talk about limited first. Okay, so this is a legendary artifact mythic. You're not going to see it a whole lot, right? So because of that, you do have to consider when I do find this in a sealed pool, or I do pick it up in a draft, can I actually play it? Maybe. There is that one slight chance that you could have a deck where this could be okay. But it's going to be tough. The first obstacle you need to get by is the 3 blue and the casting cost. Some decks in Limited will be able to swing that, some won't. So if you can't do it, you're going to have to skip this card. The second obstacle is you can't pay 9 for this thing. You need to get some instant or sorcery cards into your graveyard to make it cheaper. If you could get 3 in there, for example, now it's only going to cost you 6. That is actually very reasonable. So if I had a very typical heavy creature build for Drafter Sealed, I might skip this card, but if I'm leaning a little more towards some instants and sorceries, maybe Izzet colors, or if I had some ramp, I might go for it. Now, if you do get it into play, make sure you don't deck yourself, but if you're seeing that many cards, hopefully you can put the game away. Also, this is an artifact, so it could play well with some other cards that are in the set. Okay, so what about Standard? Does it see play there? Yup, I think it does, because Niv Mizzet Perun is going to be a very powerful card in this post-rotation Standard. I do think we're going to see some Izzet spell decks, and this actually does fit very well there. Could show up maybe in some different types of builds as well, potentially. Another place where this card could really shine, though, is going to be Commander, obviously. You have more resources, you have more time, you have more cards. You could just do bigger things with this. And sure, it could see Brawl play, too. Mirror Maid. Okay, this one is 2 blue and 1 enchantment, and it enters the battlefield as a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Not just under your control, so that's worth noting. Limited, it is a rare, but if I do have it, maybe sometimes it makes my cut, sometimes it doesn't. Here's the thing. Game 1 for my main deck, I'm not going to push this into my deck if I don't have good targets for it to copy within my deck. I'm not going to rely on my opponent playing some great artifact or enchantment that I want to copy. Now, if they do, I could side it in for Game 2 or Game 3. But to main deck this, I want to have some good targets. Standard, could it see play there? I do think it does have potential, especially as we're seeing more good artifacts and enchantments. Seems like every day there's more coming out in this set. Plus, we're going to be going back to Theros, which is, I'm sure, going to be an enchantment-focused set. Considering all that, if this doesn't see play right now in Standard, perhaps down the road it probably will. Yet again, a place where this could really shine, though, is Commander, because you know there's going to be some amazing enchantments and artifacts that you can copy. Simply, you could copy a Mana Rock if push came to shove. But you know, if it's on your side of the battlefield or another player's, there's going to be something to do with this card. Same is true in Brawl, too. Mistford River Turtle. Okay, this one's a common. You'll see more of these floating around in a draft. But yeah, it's a fine limited card. I don't have a lot to say about it. Forecasting costs 1/5. It does gum up the ground. Blue likes that. Although a 4-drop, it might be a little too late. You already took a lot of damage from that aggro deck. However, you're not really playing this as much for the defensive side, I don't think, as the potential offense. This is one of a number of cards that we're going to look at today that interact with non-human creatures. In this case, when it attacks, another target non-human creature can't be blocked this turn. Because of the high toughness, this thing many times could survive an attack, and if you can push across extra damage, especially in a board stall, nothing wrong with that. Vantress Gargoyle. This is another rare. There's a lot to look at here, so let's go over the card quickly, and then we'll talk about what you can do with it. Blue and 1, artifact creature Gargoyle, 5/4 with flying. Now, this can't attack unless defending player has 7 or more cards in their graveyard. Maybe a reason to use Folio of Fancys there. It can't block unless you have 4 or more cards in hand. Tap, each player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. Okay, let's begin with limited first. Even though it's a rare, you won't see it there often, but if you get a chance to play with it, it could be quite good, actually. Here's what I like about the card. It's only 2 casting cost, really cheap, has other interactions within the set because it is an artifact. And you know what? Play it on turn 2. Might just simply be a 5/4 defender in the air. That's really good. I mean, that slows down the game big time. Secondly, though, later in the game when the opponent does have 7 cards in their graveyard, now you got yourself a big beater in the air. And you didn't pay a whole lot for this thing. Now, if your opponent needs help getting those cards in the graveyard, you can simply tap this at the end of their turn every time, mill yourself, mill them. That's going to put a clock on them as well. And it also makes them think twice about some of their plays. Did they play a card that's going to go to the graveyard, knowing that it's 1 card closer to this thing being able to attack? Beyond that, as we've been seeing, there's reasons to care about not only cards in your opponent's graveyard, but also sometimes cards in your graveyard. So that does work well with other cards in the set too. This feels like a pretty high power rare to me, actually, for Drafter Sealed. What about Standard? Could it see play there? I think it could, for all the reasons I just mentioned. Also, it's really easy to recur with Emery, Lurker of the Lock, so that could be very good if somebody does have a removal spell and they take this out early. You could always bring it back later when it can attack. I also kind of look at this card and feel some parallels to Tarmogoyf. Now, it's no Tarmogoyf, granted, but it does have some similarities. It's cheap. It could be a big attacker faster than it should be. And it can attack. That's the big drawback here. But there are ways to mitigate that. And I think if you had a consistent way to make sure cards end up in your opponent's graveyard, yeah, you know what? This could be a very powerful early beater that they might just not be prepared for some of the time. I might even go as far to say it has some modern potential because of the cost here. Granted, a lot of times you may want your big blue creature to be hexproof or unblockable. It doesn't do those things. But whenever you can cheat the curve, there's a lot of potential power there. Revenge of Ravens. I think this is a good limited uncommon, actually. I usually am not a big fan of enchantments that cost 4. It doesn't do anything on its own, and it's not a good draw if you're behind, which is what keeps cards like this out of Standard. But when it comes to Drafter Sealed, there have been other cards we've seen that drain the opponent just 1 point at a time. maybe there is a strategy out there. If you put the cards together, you could get one of those sort of death by 1,000 cut style decks. Could be good if the cards are there. Barge in. Here's another one of these cards that cares about non-humans, but it's not just all about non-humans here. You can pay a red, instant speed. Target attacking creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So you can't use this defensively, but even if you stop there, it could be a decent offensive combat trick. Each attacking non-human creature gains trample until end of turn. That's really the appeal of the card, though. So as long as I have a fair amount of non-humans in my Drafter Sealed deck, this is going to be a great common for me. Now, if my build happens to be mostly humans, maybe it's a knight build and I have mostly human knights, then perhaps I skip this. But most of the time, I think you'll find value in this card. Enough of your creatures will be non-human to maybe get past a board stall or put away a game later on. Or in a pinch, if you needed to give something +2/+2 when it was attacking, you have that option and it's pretty cheap. This is maybe a card that would fit into the standard feather builds as well. Bonecrusher Giants. Okay, another rare here. This one has an adventure attached to it. This card is super, super pushed. This is probably the best red card we've seen in the set so far. Take a look at this thing. Instant speed adventure, red and 1, stomp. Basically, it's a shock for 2 mana. And then, after you shock something, go ahead and pay a red and 2, and you got yourself a 4/3. And if it becomes the target of a spell or ability, it deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. So turn 2, go ahead and shock something. Turn 3, play a 4/3 creature? What? And you only used 1 card to do it? That's crazy value. Now, if your opponent does have a removal spell ready, okay, you lose this, but it still deals 2 damage to that player on the way out. Better than nothing, right? This is going to be an awesome rare if you can get your hands on it for Drafter Sealed. Standard, sure, it sees standard play. Of course it does. Mono red aggro, Gruul aggro. I think we're going to see quite a bit of this card next season. Also, I would test it out even in modern aggro decks. I think it has some potential. Here's an interesting one. Ferocity of the Wilds, enchantment for a red and 2. Attacking non-human creatures you control get +1/+0 and have trample. So if you have a fair amount of non-human creatures in your limited build, sure, I think this is very playable. Not too expensive. Doesn't do anything by itself, though. Not a good card when you're behind, kind of like the enchantment we saw earlier. But what's cool about it is it doesn't care if you're going wide or you're going tall. Works in either situation as long as you have non-human creatures. And it's an uncommon, so it will be a little more plentiful than all these rares we've been looking at today. Yeah, as long as you have enough non-human creatures, this could be very playable for you in Drafter Sealed. If you don't, for some reason, skip it. Irencrag Feats. Okay, this is a rare. This is a cool card, though. So let's talk limited first. Again, you're not going to see a ton of it. Yeah, it's a nice mana boost, but you also have to have something to do with it. So if you do have a higher curve deck, then maybe it's worth running. If you don't, though, I would probably skip it. You don't want to be in a situation where you draw this and you just don't have anything to do with it. Now, I think where this card is actually going to really shine this time is standard. Here's why. Imagine getting to turn 4 and playing something like Drechsler, or Chandra Awakened Inferno, or even Ugin the Ineffable. Being able to push that curve with a card like this could be very good for you. Modern? Maybe Storm might want to try it out, perhaps. I do think this is going to be great in Commander, though, Storm-style decks, or just if you want the mana boost, it could be a good card to include in your deck. This should be a good option for Brawl as well. Redcap Raiders. Okay, here's another card that interacts with a non-human, and this is a 3/2 for 3. Typically, I say not a big fan of those type of stats because many times they do trade down for 2 drops. Don't like that economy. When it attacks, if I do have another maybe small or creature that I just don't want to attack in with that's a non-human, I have the option of tapping that creature. This gets +1/+1 and trample. Trample can be good to push across damage, especially if I were to put equipment on this or something like that. On its own, maybe it's still a little lackluster because I do have to tap down this other creature for it to get the buff. Other than that, it's not a great card. But if I had another trick behind it, like equipment, like a combat trick, like an aura maybe even, then yeah, the card becomes far more playable. With that being said, sometimes in sealed, you just need a curve filler anyway. Many times I do get stuck playing a 3/2 for 3, even though I don't like to. This at least is not a vanilla card, doesn't feel nearly as bad as some of the others they printed. Sundering Stroke. Okay, here's something to do with Irencrag Feat. So, granted, in limited, they're both rares. You're not going to get both of the cards unless you're really, really, really lucky. However, this is still a good card in limited, especially sealed, because sealed tends to be even more creature-centric than draft does. But regardless, for 7 mana, it is a little expensive, but you can split that damage among a bunch of different creatures. You could really tip the board state in your favor. You can also go to the face with this because it is any target. You could send all 7 of that damage to your opponent. That's pretty significant too, could even close out a game sometimes. This is going to be a phenomenal rare when you have the opportunity to play with it. I think this can see standard play too, maybe in a big red deck. A card like this makes me feel like big red potentially could be a thing next season, as long as it gets enough support. And obviously, this is a big spell that will be good in Commander and Brawl. And in those formats, you might have a better chance to actually cast this for all 7 in red, depending on your deck makeup. Fierce Witchstalker. This is a pretty nice beater for Drafter Sealed. It's a forecasting cost 4/4 with Trample, and when it enters the battlefield, you get a food token. So not only will it play into food strategies, but even on its own, even if I don't care about food tokens, wow, you know what? This is a pretty decent creature. Like, don't overlook that. This is a 4-drop that can definitely put across some damage. I would even go as far as to say, maybe a long shot, but if a food deck got there in standard, this could be part of it. Pauper, though, I would try it out in Pauper Stompy decks. I at least think it could have some potential there. Wolf's Quarry. Okay, maybe this is the yikes of the video. 2 green and 4, create 3 1/1 green board creature tokens with, when this creature dies, create a food token. I guess at the end of the day, the question is, how bad do you want food tokens? If you want them really, really bad for your draft build, especially maybe, then perhaps I consider this. Especially if I have cards that let me sacrifice for benefit. This actually gives me 6 things to sacrifice. 3 creatures and then 3 food tokens. And there may be builds where that is good. But I gotta believe I got a better card at the 6th spot than this. Because that's the thing. The card on its own is not the worst thing in the world if I really care about food tokens. Or I need sacrifice fodder. But considering that I'm taking a spot in my deck that's a higher portion of the curve spot, that's where you want a bomb that's going to change the face of the game. Just doesn't feel great. I'm not going to say it's unplayable because, like I said, the food strategy does feel like it could be pretty strong. Same with some of the sacrifice mechanics out there. And there might be a time where this is the better thing in your pool when you're looking at the higher end of your curve. But most of the time, I think you're going to skip this one. Try the gray stuff. It's delicious. Here's Dance of the Manse. Okay, this is actually pretty cool. Don't get too caught up on the whole idea of these permanents coming back as 4/4 creatures. So take a look at the whole thing here. Blue, white, and X. It's a sorcery rare. Return up to X target artifact and or non-aura enchantment cards, each would convert a mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If X is 6 or more, those permanents are 4/4 creatures in addition to their other types. It would be nice to be able to create a whole bunch of 4/4 creatures, but that's going to cost you some mana to do. Quite a bit of mana, actually. Once in a while, maybe that does work out in Drafter Sealed, but I think what I just want to do with this is just find small amounts of value. Let's say I have a cheap artifact that sacrifices for some kind of benefit. Maybe I just go ahead and pay 4 into this, and I just get that artifact back and I can do it again. That might be worth running. Again, we're going to have to see more of the set just to feel how consistent that would be. But there could be reasons that you might run this in your Drafter Sealed deck. There could be other decks, though, that really don't have targets for this, and you're just going to skip it. Regardless, it's a rare, you're not going to see it a lot, but occasionally, you might have a use for it. Again, don't shoot too high. Don't try to always go for the 4/4 creatures. Look and see where value is going to be best. Standard. Could we get an egg-style deck with this at some point, maybe? You know, that could happen because we are seeing some good artifacts, even some good enchantments in this set. We know Theros will most likely be pretty enchantment-focused down the road. If not now, perhaps in the future, we may have an artifact/enchantment deck where this could work really well. Time will tell. Where this card will probably shine the most, though, is simply Commander. You know recurring artifacts and enchantments could be good there. You have more mana to play with. You have more time to play with. You could be running an egg strategy, or you could just be playing this for value. Either way, it could be good. And for Brawl, I think this is a good card too, and it will most likely get better as time goes on. Feyburrow Elder, yet another rare here, and yet another very solid card. Let's talk Drafter Sealed. This is extremely playable if you're in these colors. 3 casting cost, and it's going to tap at least for 2 mana. If you're running permanents of other colors, then potentially it could be even bigger, and also give you even more mana. Again, another rare, but when you do come across it, it is going to be fantastic for you. I'll cut to the chase. Yes, this does see standard play. Ramp decks, Stompy decks, remember, we still have the opportunity to go pretty deep with colors with Shocklands and all. Maybe throw a third color in, perhaps add red. Gets even better. Yeah, I have no doubt this will be seeing play in the format. I think this has a shot at modern play, maybe in Rainbow Niv Mizzet, for example. Now, yet again, this is a card that Commander players are going to be really happy to see. It's very reminiscent of Bloom Tender, which is a very expensive card now, actually. This is another opportunity to pick up a very similar card at a much cheaper price tag. This will be great in Commander for all the reasons I just mentioned, and even more so where you have the opportunity many times to consistently go with 4 or 5 colors in your deck. Also great in Brawl as well. Grum Gully the Generous. Okay, I like this one a lot. It's an uncommon legendary creature, Goblin Shaman, 3/3. It's going to cost you a green, a red, and 1. Each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So for limited purposes, you got yourself a 3/3 for 3. That's pretty good economy, even if it is 2 different colors. Additionally, each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. The way that is worded, it's not just regular creatures. It could be tokens as well. But regardless, they will get +1/+1 counters when they enter. So that's really sweet. Even if I don't have a ton of non-human creatures in my deck for some reason, even if I only hit 1 during the course of the game, I'm still finding additional value compared to what I paid for the card. If I happen to have a lot of them in my pool, wonderful. I do think this could see standard play too, maybe in a Gruul deck, anything that's pretty creature-centric that's using non-human creatures, and like I said, maybe a token strategy at some point too. In Brawl, this could be a really fun commander for you. It also could be in Commander, although I don't think it's as powerful as a lot of other things that go on in that format nowadays. But it could be part of the 99 there and be decent. Lock Dragon, another strong devotion card with a hybrid casting cost. I don't have a lot to say about this one. It's a fine limited card, I'd be happy to play it. 3/2 flyer, you got evasion. Yes, I did pay 4 for it, but it has another ability. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, I get to rummage. Rummaging can be good. Yeah, I definitely feel I'm getting my value out of this card. Not something I necessarily play in Standard, but definitely has its role in Limited. This one comes to us from a Japanese language preview. It's Stonecoil Serpent. Okay, this is actually pretty pushed. X casting cost, artifact creature snake. It's got reach. It's got trample. It's got protection from multicolor. When this enters the battlefield, it will come in with the X +1/+1 counters on it. Okay, so on your right, you see the picture. Now there's the extended art picture in case you're curious. We have both of them. Let's talk limited with this card first, though. Yes, I love these type of cards. I've said this before in other set reviews. These X creatures scale with the game. If I need a 2-drop because I just need that curve filler, it's a 2-drop. If I need a big old creature later in the game, it's a big old creature later in the game. Even better in this case because it has trample. Also has reach if I need to be defensive, but that trample is going to push across a lot of damage later in the game if I happen to draw this when I'm in a board stall. Also has protection from multicolor. That could come in handy too. This is awesome. It's another rare, so again, adjust your expectations when it comes to how often you're going to see it. But if you can play with it, go for it. Going to be awesome for you. Doesn't commit you to any colors either, which is fantastic in draft especially. Standard, I think this sees standard play for all the reasons I just mentioned. This potentially could show up in a number of different decks as a matter of fact. And of course, the big mana formats like Commander and Brawl, this will be good there too. This one's a Chinese simplified language preview, loosely translated Countryside Villa. This is another part of the cycle. We saw the card that also doubled as a swamp not too long ago. This one doubles as a plains. When it enters the battlefield, it will be tapped unless you control 3 or more other plains. And if this does enter untapped, you get a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Not an amazing effect, right? It's okay. But under the right circumstances, this is a free effect you're getting just for playing your land. I think that's actually pretty sweet. Don't underestimate these cards. So yes, there are certain decks that don't want these. If I don't have enough plains in my deck, yeah, no reason to play this. Just play a plains, right? It'll be more consistent when it comes to the speed of your deck. If I'm playing Drafter Sealed and I have a Boros aggro build, maybe not the best thing to play because I don't want to end up playing this tapped on turn 1 or turn 2. However, mid-rangey decks are going to appreciate something like this. As long as the plains are there, every once in a while the ability will trigger. I don't hate the fact that maybe this could come into play tapped on turn 1. Alright, you know what? I'll throw it in my deck. So yeah, I do think you're going to be playing these quite frequently in Drafter Sealed. Standard they might even see play just for the reasons I mentioned. It has to be the right deck though. Again, don't throw this in an aggressive build, but maybe a mid-range deck would be fine with this. Free ability. Nothing crazy, but free ability. Depending on my mana makeup, sure, I could even throw these into some of my commander decks too and be happy with them. Same thing goes to Brawl, of course. Alright, that's it for today's previews. Now, tomorrow we're going to take a little break from previews and do our Market Watch video that we do every weekend. And then there's going to be a couple preview cards coming out this weekend. Monday, the previews kick back into full gear, and we'll do more of these videos until they reveal the whole set. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.